Next up is Alfred from Tickly Xylophones.
It's not a real place.
Hey there, Alfred. What do you want to ask a question? Do you want to make a statement? How do you want to approach this?
I'm sorry, I just came on. I didn't hear what you guys were saying before the.
We're just saying hi. We're just saying hi and how are you doing?
Yeah,
what's your?
Yeah, what you want to talk about?
I think the screener put it in. I said that mythicism is a conspiracy theory, which is fine.
Okay. No, that's fine. I usually don't like to I'd rather have the caller introduce the topic, and just so that we don't potentially get something wrong or something lost in translation almost. So I usually like to have you in your own words describe it, so that we're not working off of some kind of our understanding of what you want to talk about. Rather, you're telling us what you want to talk about.
I understand.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me why you think it's a conspiracy theory, Alfred.
Well, I'd like to make a slight point before I get to that.
Sure.
I'd just like to note that I'm a person of color, just like Jesus was. And sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, I know that. Well, it's just that you guys chose to do this show just before Good Friday, correct?
It just happened to land on a. But I mean,
yeah, this is not organized to be
doing the show, but
Yeah, I don't really care about Good Friday. Good Friday doesn't seem all that good to me, but I understand that y'all consider it Good Friday.
I mean, any day we're going to be talking about this, it's going to be blasphemy, whatever day it is. So, I mean, that's just the way it is.
I mean, it's one.
Sorry, Alfred. I don't know. You seem to be going through a bad area or something like that. We couldn't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, better.
Yes,
much better.
We got you.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm just wondering, do you think it's emotionally intelligent to say that a Jewish man of color who was tortured to death in Roman-occupied Palestine?
What was the first part of that question? Do we think it's what to
emotionally intelligent
to do what?
Just before Good Friday.
Oh, to talk about it?
No, to question that he wasn't tortured to death by Roman officials
we're not
in Roman-occupied Palestine.
We weren't questioning that he wasn't tortured to death. We are questioning whether he existed in the first place, full stop. And that doesn't seem to be an inherently offensive question to ask. And we would ask it any day.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter what day we're asking it there, Alfred. Also, this is coming off like you're giving very persecution fetish on this. Like this is not a thing directed against you or anything like that. We're primarily concerned with what the evidence shows about the religion of Christianity and whether or not its supposed founder actually existed. This isn't a personal dig at you or any particular Christian out there. I don't know why you have to make it like about emotional intelligence or anything like that.
Right. And let me just put this out there, Alfred. If I thought that there had been a real Hebrew person of color, Aramaic speaking in the first century Judah, I have no problem with that. The question is, did this person exist? Was he the son of God? Even I thought he was a real person, we would still be fair to talk about the religion that sprung up around him, whether we're talking about a real person who historically existed or one who didn't. So the emotional,
sure. I'm just saying
the emotional edge you're putting on it. What's that?
I'm just saying, if you deny he existed, you must deny that he was tortured to death.
Yes,
is
exactly
that fair?
Right. That's exactly right, and that is true. That is true.
All right.
Okay. Oh, is that it? Are we done? Oh.
Well, you asked me why I think mythicism is a conspiracy theory.
Yes, right.
So I know I probably can't convince you that Jesus existed, because when you're dealing with history, there's nothing that can be said with certainty about the past.
Oh, hang on.
No. Let's
right now.
Let's stop that.
There's a big difference between historical certainty and what's probable and what's improbable, and with things that are just false and clearly unhistorical. And
I don't know what you mean by historical.
Well, you're claiming that there's a historical person, in this case, Jesus, who was a person of color, a Hebrew in the Roman Empire in the 1st century, who was crucified. These are all historical claims. What is our evidence for those claims? We can look into that. We can look when those were written, who wrote them, do they hold up to historical, is what they're describing historically plausible in the first place? And we can do that for anybody, not just Jesus, not just religious figures. We can do that for any historical person or event that you like. And we can ask, what lines of evidence do we have to believe it? Who's making this claim? What's their bias? Do we have anything else they wrote? Is their subject, did he write something? Did we have any physical evidence for him? Do we have any textual evidence outside this cult for him? There's all kinds of lines that we can approach this from.
Sure, and I would say that, like people say, the only evidence we have attesting to Jesus is the New Testament, as if that's one thing. It's a library. It's different streams of tradition. I don't think it's just from one.
Right. So we're not saying that the Bible is only one book written by one author or anything like that. We do recognize the different authors, but I believe that both David and I are in agreement about this, that there's only one actual reference in the New Testament, and that would be Paul's work. And Paul never actually states that he met Jesus before his death. He only mentions having a revelatory experience of the risen Jesus after he supposedly died.
He talked to his brother.
He talked to someone who claims to be the brother of the Lord, which seems to be a sect title. And we can talk about all that. But if he really thought that was his brother, why does just a few verses later he describe all the Jerusalem church leaders as fake Christians that he never doesn't submit to for a moment? He talks about these guys like he hates them. In Galatians, he actually talks and brags about how he met Peter face to face and confronted him. If he thinks these guys are the friends and family of Jesus, he certainly doesn't show it.
Okay. So,
and again, and for more discussion, I mean, I've got 8 books on the subject, and I would invite you to look at any of those and take a look at the arguments presented there. And again, if I thought there really was just a guy named Jesus, just a merely mortal guy named Jesus, I would have to go out and write a book about that, because knowing what I know from just the research I've done over the last 25 years, I don't even see how there could be a guy who was just, a mere mortal that got accidentally deified by his believers. I don't even see how that could be the case.
Sure. Although I think you guys took issue with my claim that nothing can be said with certainty about the past. Do you doubt that?
Well, I mean, I just don't want to overstate that, because there's levels of certainty, and there's provisional certainty, and it all kind of depends on how strong the evidence is and what kinds of evidence we are talking about.
Yeah. So if I can give you an example there, Alfred, typically a lot of people like to point to Alexander the Great. That's one particular figure of the past that people regularly like to compare Jesus to. We have a lot of different lines of evidence that point to the conclusion that Alexander the Great existed. Not only do we have coins minted in his visage, we've got events from the past that seem to have only happened because Alexander the Great actually existed. There's different economic events and things of that nature, wartime events and everything like that happened.
There's just brute historical facts that could not happen unless Alexander had done what is attributed to him. like the founding of the city of Alexandria, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these things.
And then go ahead, David.
I was just going to say, in the case of Jesus, and to explain early Christianity, all we have to explain it is the belief of people preaching this person. That's all we need. And that's all we get, really. And the way they were preaching about Jesus before the Gospels were written, before those 4 Gospels were written, seems very different in hindsight than the way they preached Jesus after those 4 Gospels were written. And there's lots more we could say about that, too.
Yeah. And I was also, sorry, Alfred.
Conspiracy territory.
No. How are we getting into conspiracy territory?
No, I just said it sounds like we are. I mean, do you think there was some kind of cover-up?
Yeah, but I'm asking you how. Like, how? What have we said so far in the conversation about Alexander the Great and how his evidence compares to Jesus? Which I was going to continue about, like Arian and his biography of Alexander the Great and why it differs greatly from the supposed New Testament Gospels and other information that we have about Jesus. Like, I was going to go into a whole thing about that, but you seem to think that a genuine analysis of the historical evidence that we have for Alexander the Great strays into conspiracy territory. And I'm kind of curious as to why you think that.
Sure. So I think it was David. He said that there was a difference in how they taught about Jesus after the gospel.
Right.
And that gets into conspiracy territory, in my view. Or
wait.
How does it?
Pause for a second. How so? How so, Alfred?
Well, I'd like to hear what you mean. Like, does it involve some kind of cover-up or a change in doctrine?
No, not at all. What I mean is the earliest forms of Christianity, and there seems to be more than one of them, they seem to be an evolution out of earlier forms like the mystery faiths and the Hellenistic religions. When you look at something like the book of Hebrews in the New Testament, it does things. It doesn't talk about a Jesus who's here on earth. It talks about a Jesus who's like Melchizedek, who has no mother, no father, no genealogy, even though our Gospels
have he was crucified outside the Jerusalem gate.
Yeah, it doesn't say Jerusalem gate.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay, and it seems to be implying that all this is happening in heaven, and it makes the contrast of if he had been on earth, if he was on earth, he'd be this kind of high priest or that kind of high priest, and everything about that speaks to the kind of Jesus as a divine figure that we see in early Christianity, where they treat him like an angel, they treat him like an emanation of God, a spirit, like Philo, the Holy Spirit, the pneuma, the logos and the pneuma. He's a purely off-camera figure. Then
so you're seeing parallels?
Sorry?
Are you seeing parallels between Christian literature and other myths?
Oh, I mean, you can talk about that. I don't want to overstate the parallels because there is such a thing as parallelomania. But that said, it's clearly not that he's a cookie cutter copycat of these religions. He's part of this stream of religions.
And with
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, with the parallels, what you're looking for are like the same information that's told in the exact same order, and it obviously the second reference or the reference that you're comparing it to comes much later and has some kind of connection to the earlier reference. So it's not merely that there are like similarities; it's the fact that the similarities occur in the exact same order in both works. And so like we could talk about that if you wanted to. But David, you were wanting to say something.
Well, I just want to say what we see, the deeper we look into earliest forms of Christianity, the less it looks like anything we think of as Christianity. And the more it looks like all these religions, some of these religions that came before it, these particular strands of religion. That changes after the war with Rome, after the temple's destroyed. And Judaism goes through this crisis about what do we do now that Romans just destroyed our temple. The Gospel of Mark seems to be the first reaction to that. And Mark creates this allegory point by point from the Hebrew scriptures to create this figure. And Matthew loves that idea. The guy who wrote Luke loves that idea. John later still likes that idea. But nobody before the Gospels start to be written do we see that. We don't see people preaching about how we knew Jesus and he lived here and he did this and that. It's always he's doing this in heaven and he's a divine figure. And there's all these different interpretations of what kind of it was. I'm sorry?
So one of the hallmarks of a conspiracy theory is it's unfalsifiable. So you can say all this happens in the heavens, at least in a gospel or in the mythology.
No. When I say it's happening in heaven, I'm quoting what the book of Hebrews and early Christians were saying, that this is happening in heaven.
For instance, we're not making a speculative claim. Well,
what's that?
Does Paul say Jesus was crucified in heaven?
Yeah, well, actually, Paul doesn't. Paul doesn't specify like who exactly crucified him, where he was crucified. He's really vague on that particular point. But
I will say this: he thinks wherever he was crucified, that if it had happened, it was a secret in heaven that's only been revealed now, and if it weren't for preachers like him, nobody would know about it. And he says things like, "What is the actual quote?" Jews look for signs, miraculous signs, and Greeks look for wisdom. But we don't have anything like that. We only preach Christ crucified. Where if you read the Gospels, you've got both of that in spades. And yet in his time, him and other preachers, and even rival preachers who he says are preaching another gospel about another Jesus, all these different strands of early Christianity, you don't see anything grounded on earth yet. He's talking about cosmocrates, these cosmic rulers crucified Jesus. And if they'd known who they were crucifying, they would never have done it because it was all a secret plan of God to forgive sin. He talks about the princes of powers of air. He talks about these demonic forces. He doesn't use the same words he described to describe Roman authorities when he's talking about the authorities who actually crucified Jesus.
So, one of the main reasons I view this as a conspiracy theory, and I know you guys aren't Richard Carrier. I had the opportunity to talk to him, and I was trying to be charitable. I asked him, like, look, does mythicism necessarily entail a cover-up? He said, oh, no, it doesn't entail a cover-up. That there was a cover-up is just a fact. And it was at that moment that, like, you could see the mask flip, at least from my perspective, because
hold on. I have to stop you, Alfred. I have to stop you. Richard Carrier is not a conspiracy theorist on this. In fact, he's written multiple articles where he eviscerates the more mythicist conspiracy theorists out there. Number two, I don't exactly know what you're talking about on this, because like as far as a cover up goes, like he could be talking about a number of things, and without the exact context, I don't really know how to respond to that because like there were later.
I do know I talked to him this afternoon. I got him on speed dial. If he's not busy, we can get him on the phone right now. But
I was at his house the other weekend.
I'm very dubious that he thinks there was a cover up. Do
you think later Christians conspired to obscure earlier Christianity?
No,
that's what I was going to get into.
Maybe that's what he's talking about. It's not a conspiracy.
You don't want to answer, apparently.
No,
we do.
No. I'm saying there is definitely a difference in early Christianity and later Christianity. And there's definitely, we have the textual evidence where different factions of the church are changing things in their own scriptures to make it match their particular interpretation. That's just a fact. So if you want to call that a cover-up, yeah, okay, I can take that. And that's totally true. They definitely took their earliest forms and whitewashed where it came from. And we don't have any way to see, for instance, how Paul's letters, how much what we have matches what he originally wrote, because there's a 150 to 200 year gap where we have no textual evidence whatsoever, not even scraps. So there's a huge black hole where we don't know what, and even if we had a brand new letter of Paul that he wrote and we just found it for the first time, We wouldn't know it was genuine Paul. We'd say, oh, here's another weird variant of a Pauline letter. But what we do know, and what's been very well established, is early Christianity, and it's not the only religion that does this by any stretch, but early Christianity was remarkable in the amount of its scriptures that was forged, just over and above what you might expect. And Bart Ehrman has done an amazing job talking about the orthodox corruption of Scripture, talking about forgery and counter-forgery in Scripture. The list just goes on and on. If you want to call that a cover-up, yeah, I would be willing to call that a cover-up, sure. But it's not a cover-up in the same way you're thinking.
Like in the earliest,
you seem to be thinking that there was a real Jesus, and people didn't like that, so they pretended it didn't happen. And that's not what we're talking about at all.
No, would you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Okay, tell me if I'm wrong about this, but it seems like you're saying that there was a real Jesus, and some later Christians didn't like that, so they pretended there wasn't one, and atheists like us have sort of picked up on that idea, and that's your conspiracy theory.
No. I'm saying that the mythicists tend to. It's the exact opposite. That it seems, and this is a generalized picture, that Christianity started as these mythic cults, and then later Christians obscured that mythic root. Sorry?
Oh, mythic. Gotcha. Sorry, I didn't catch one of your words, but now I think I got it now.
Sorry, yeah. And later Christians kind of historized it, obscured that mythical bedrock. And
I
that was a cover-up.
I mean,
yeah, if I'm understanding you correctly, yeah, that's exactly what we're saying.
Well, yeah, but that's also not a cover-up. They're not cut. That's just no. Hold on, Alfred. That's not a cover-up. So, what a cover-up would be like the that Roman Jesus theory, or the Roman Christianity theory, where they say that the Romans invented Christ in order to somehow devastate the Jewish population or something like that. Would be a cover-up, and there's multiple different versions of that. What?
That's an invention, not a cover-up.
Okay.
Well, tomato.
I've watched this documentary.
Here's what you're saying. Right. You're saying what we're saying is that it's not how to put this. When you call it a conspiracy theory, the image that we get on this end of the conversation is that you're saying that some cabal set out to deliberately mask the origins of Christianity, or they invented a fake Christ, or that we're saying that they invented a fake Christ, or that you're saying that you're thinking that we're thinking that there was a cover-up to disguise the real Jesus. Is any of that sounding right to what you're thinking about us?
The first one more so, and I don't think you guys see it as a totally centralized conspiracy theory. I mean, Christianity wasn't centralized, right? It would have taken
Absolutely
a real. Okay.
It would be a very weird thing.
So Alfred,
there was some puppet master controlling it all. It doesn't. We don't see any evidence of that. It's just Christians being Christians. It's religious writers being religious writers.
Yeah, Alfred, I'm just kind of curious. Do you believe in the other mystery faiths, like the other mystery cults? During the first century and prior to it, like, do you think that those are real too?
I haven't really looked into it. I have no problem with it.
I would definitely suggest maybe reading up on what mystery cults were in the first century and prior to the first century, because we're essentially saying about Christianity what everybody already knows about mystery cults, in that the savior figure at the center of these mystery cults were never real people, but myths were developed out of existing beliefs where they were syncretized together in order to produce a new belief and for people to believe in that. So like we're just saying that the exact same process that happened to other faiths, like Persian religions and Egyptian religions.
Yeah, right. I see this same origin and development pattern happening over all our major world religions, East and West. Pattern is that it starts with a purely 100% imaginary founder figure, And all the stories about this founder figure are always once upon a time stories that take place. Oh, this happened a couple generations ago. This happened just a few, years ago, or it happened hundreds of years ago, but it never happens contemporaneously. We don't have any contemporary evidence for most of these figures, almost all these figures. And when we do,
so if I may,
it's something like, sorry, go ahead.
If I may, I just wanted to direct your viewers to a video by Randal Rauser. It's Why Jesus Mythicism is a Conspiracy Theory. And he lists out these 7 hallmarks of conspiracy theories. And in my
Let's
mind,
hear him.
He says
Let's hear him.
Meets all. Sorry?
Let's hear them.
Sure.
The 7.
So the first is a cabal, a secret society. And I guess
no.
If you define it,
that's not what we're claiming. So no.
Yeah, absolutely not. We're not saying that. Go ahead.
If I may list the other 6, it'll take about 20 seconds tops. Okay, and then we.
No, hold on. Okay. But that's kind of a gish gallop. Can we please take them one at a time? So the first one was there's a secret cabal. That's not what we're saying. What's the second one?
It'll take 20 seconds. You've got all day to
go
through them,
but you see, we can't address you can't just throw a whole bunch of shit at us and expect us to remember every single point. What's the problem in us handling them one?
John. Let them list them, and then let's go one by one.
Okay.
Yeah. That was okay. So the 6, illusory pattern perception, unfalsifiability. What
does he mean by that? Sorry, wait. What does he mean by that?
An unfalsifiability?
No. What was illusionary pattern? What was it?
Illusory pattern perception.
I don't know what that means. What does he mean by that?
Parallelomania. I think he's talking about parallelomania.
Okay.
Is he talking about that, or is he talking like mass hallucinations?
Okay. Typically, the conspiracy theory, the view is represented by a tiny minority of people with relevant expertise. The theorists, they tend to rationalize why the consensus doesn't agree with them. They make special pleading appeals, and lastly, there's strong rhetoric to marginalize dissenting opinion. So if you want to dive into that.
What was that last one? Strong rhetoric, marginalize, what?
Strong rhetoric to marginalize dissenting opinion. Is my connection clear?
Gotcha. It kind of comes and goes. Sorry, but okay. But let's go back to the top and just take those points. What was point number 2? Let's talk about that.
Sure, unfalsifiability.
Okay, I wrote in Nailed, my first book. There's a whole chapter called "Can Jesus Be Saved?" I spend the whole chapter pointing out point after point after point where you can falsify Jesus mythicism, and what it would take for me as a guy who just wrote this book to accept that there was a real Jesus. So I invite you to read that, because there's many, many ways that this could be falsified. And to be honest, if you could falsify it, I would feel honor bound to write a book retracting my previous mythicism and say, look, I didn't know this, but here's this. That's just not happening. And 25 years later, it doesn't seem to be anywhere near happening. Anyway, John, you have a thought about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, as far as like falsifiability goes, I think that if we found any kind of information that would be on par with like what we have with Arrian's biography of Alexander the Great, or other actual ancient historians that had sources that attested to a physical Jesus walking around on earth, gathering people and all this other stuff, and was not obscured or so much later written that it was obviously influenced by other different material. I think that would definitely persuade me in the direction of a historical figure. So no, it's definitely not unfalsifiable. There's definitely falsifiable criteria for the mythicist position.
And on the other,
yes, if we found a photograph, that would falsify it.
No, that's not what I fucking said. That's not what I said, Alfred. Is that what I fucking said?
Calm down. objectively speaking, yeah, if we had a photograph, that would be very helpful. Yeah, of course, we don't, but we don't need to rise to that level. Not only do we have ways to falsify this, but Christianity has tended to whitewash over the problems that aren't explained by the official explanation of Christianity, the official story of its own origins. Mythicism explains that. And again, it's perfectly falsifiable. Christianity is falsifiable, and I would argue it has been falsified. And it's not the only religion out here that has been falsified.
Right.
What's number 3?
Did you want to go through the others, or I
would love
leave
to
if you want me to.
No. I mean, we're getting hot and bothered because you're not the first person who's slapped the conspiracy label on us. I don't like it. Right. I don't like when it's called creationism for atheists, for that matter. But
it's not quite that. But
Alfred, the problem that I had was I laid out a comparable case for what would compel me to accept that Jesus existed as a historical figure, and that's based in a similar quality of evidence that we have for Alexander the Great. I'm not requiring like his visage on coins. I'm not requiring physical events to have taken place or anything. I compared it to a biography, which is what a lot of apologists claim the Gospels are, a biography about Alexander the Great, written by Arian, that was written 500 years after Alexander the Great died. But the difference is that Arian wrote about the sources that he used, to include firsthand eyewitnesses, generals, enemies, and all that kind of stuff. He even goes into great detail about what he or what sources he uses or he prefers to use when his sources disagree and there are contradictions. So like we have this intense discussion by Arian on his source material that he points to. We don't have access to them now, but he had access to them because he was a Roman biographer, a Roman historian at the time. So he had access to them. So that's my criteria, which is the same criteria that other historians use. So when you after I explain that to you and you immediately come back with, oh, so we don't have a photograph, therefore you won't believe, that is just not fucking listening to the words that are coming out of my goddamn mouth. And I would just really appreciate it if you would accurately represent what I'm telling you.
And I'm not disagreeing with John in the least a little bit, but let's take the focus back on Jesus. For instance, if we treated Jesus like any other, let's compare Jesus and Paul, for example, because there's people out there who said Paul never existed. But we have good reasons for thinking. Sure. Well, I was about to make a great point, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, I mean, Mr. Gleason, you expect some of the authors to go into detail about their source material. I think we're fortunate to have the first four verses of Luke. He kind of gets into it, but like to ask for a discussion of their source material.
Alfred, name the sources that Luke used.
No. See, here's the thing. Luke claims he vaguely implies that there are sources, and he implies that he's taking them because so many people are writing Gospels now. He feels like it's a good idea that he's going to investigate the story as it came down to his generation. But we're right back to once upon a time. Now, what are those sources? He doesn't say. We know what those sources are. The sources are Matthew and Mark. You know why? Because he steals from them. Another of his sources was Flavius Josephus.
Okay, that is a controversial statement. You must be a far theorist.
That is not a controversial statement. That's a factual statement. And please read my book, which is based on scholarly work, where we go point by point and show it. We don't.
I admire far theorists. No, I admire far theorists. The far theory is formidable, but it is not a fact. Okay, you have to understand.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard trouble saying what you find formidable. What is it? What
the Farrar theory is formidable.
The Farrar theory, gotcha. Yes, absolutely.
The Farrar theory.
Farrar,
but it is not a fact.
Yes.
I mean, so it depends on what you mean by fact.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Because it
is in academia, it's the two source hypothesis.
Sorry? Luke, depending on Josephus, may be a theory, it is also a fact. It is demonstrable, and there's no response to it that he's even tried to tackle it.
Okay, well,
I points to you for even knowing about the Farrar theory. I applaud you for that. But
yeah,
yeah.
If I may say, I'm still back to this. Like, Mr. Gleason got mad when I said, "Oh, a photograph would prove it." You're literally asking for a guide.
Alfred. That was a dickish comparison to me. You could have compared it to any other.
It was obviously an exaggeration. You're asking for a guide
you could have compared it to an appropriate source, like a first-century source, like I was about to do with John the Baptist and with Paul, but you didn't go there. So,
Alfred, I just want to specify here. I just want to specify that I gave you a criteria that is comparable to what we somewhat kind of have about Jesus now. I'm just saying that we need better evidence in order to establish Jesus that's more in line with what we have for other historical figures. That's what I said. And you came back with, so if there's not a photo, you're not going to believe it. And that comes off as a troll comment, and it comes off really dickish, in my opinion.
Right. And here's the thing. Okay. What he said was not unreasonable at all. It's like, if you want to see if this century person existed, what's evidence of other first century people that we have that makes us comfortable saying that they were like, for instance, if we had a book written by Jesus, that would be a step in the right direction. If we had physical evidence for Jesus, that would be a step in the right direction. We have physical evidence for people in his time. We have physical evidence for like Pontius Pilate. We have physical evidence
for
John the Baptist. Wait, there are other peasants who made the historical. Wait, how many? There's the Egyptian. There's John the Baptist himself. There is all the first century
evidence is there of John the Baptist.
What's that?
What physical evidence is there of John the Baptist?
We have physical evidence. I'm sorry?
No, that's my point. You asked for. Did you ask for physical evidence of Jesus? That's totally unreasonable. That is a photograph.
Well, we have physical evidence for John the Baptist. We also have textual evidence that corroborates the story in the gospel for John the Baptist. We don't have anything like
what
that
about
for
physical?
Jesus.
Is there any physical evidence?
There's carvings of the Baptist cult that John the Baptist followers have done. Now, does that mean there was a real John the Baptist?
When does that date to?
No, but this is the question. Does that mean there was a John the Baptist? I say no, because those are clearly coming from later times, not from the cult. If you tried to say there was no such thing as a John the Baptist cult, I would point to that as evidence. Well, no, clearly there was, because those guys carved that. But was there a real John the Baptist? I could see him being mythical, but whether he was mythical or not, if I had to bet between Jesus or John the Baptist, my money would be on John the Baptist, because we don't have a lot better evidence for John the Baptist than Jesus, but we have a little better evidence for John the Baptist than Jesus. And we can talk about that too, if you like. We have better evidence that Paul existed than that he did not exist. And part of what complicates that is that there's more than one Paul. There's the Paul in Luke, which is clearly made up by Luke, and has nothing to do with what Paul tells us in his letters. There's the Paul of his letters, and then there's the doctored Pauls of his letters, and then the forged letters of Paul. But we have good reason to think that Paul existed in some form or another, even if all our information about him is compromised by the fact that it was forged in his name, or it was taken from earlier writings and mashed up into by later redactors and later editors. But you would have a real hard time convincing me that that no Paul existed. With Jesus, we don't have any of that. We have every reason to think that he's a mythological creation. And again, I've got 8 books out there that talk about those reasons why. And anyway, yeah.
If I may get to the next,
falsifiable. And they're all falsifiable as well. Yeah, go ahead.
So the next one is generally conspiracy theorists. Their views are represented by a tiny minority of people with relevant expertise. Did that come in?
Well, yeah. That came in, but that's just an appeal to like popularity or
No,
an
it's
appeal
actually
to.
not. There's a distinction.
Okay,
Here's
tell
the
me
thing.
what this distinction is.
Sure. Well, so generally, this is established that when you want advice on something, if you want to get informed opinion, that you consult people who know what they're talking about. Like if you have cancer and like 99 out of 100 say, hey, take chemo, and you have one guy who's saying, no, eat this, gunji berry, really go with it.
RGF,
Like that guy could be right.
Okay.
Yeah.
If we go with that, Alfred, if we go with that, then we should be Christian. Like, I mean, because in this particular field, in the field of like early Jesus studies, early Christianity studies, the majority of scholars that are working on these types of things are going to be Christians that affirm that Jesus physically resurrected from the dead as a historical fact. That's what they're saying.
I don't know if that's true.
If that is true.
No, it is true.
Are you
saying? But here's the thing you can do. You can say, okay, that's the religious scholars, but what do the secular scholars say? And what's their consensus? And when you start asking that, and what is the consensus, what Jesus really was, and what kind of person he was, what can we know about him, that consensus starts falling apart very quickly.
Yes, that's true. And what they can agree on is that he was a Jewish man and he was crucified. They can agree on that. That's what they can agree on.
Yeah, that's a pretty low bar because that's just a rehash of what our sources, our only sources, say about him. Not even our best sources or our most reliable sources.
Reason.
Our only sources. Yeah, but
you can't even grant that.
Here's the thing. Just like atheism, mythicism is always going to be a minority position in this. For secular scholars, there is no consensus on who or what Jesus was. And all they can do is agree on the very basic things, but they don't even agree on that. There is a growing consensus that among secular scholars that what we know about Jesus is we don't have enough information to know anything to say certainty about him. We've got scholars who say, oh no, well, we can agree that he was a boy. We can agree that he was a Jew. We can agree that there were people who worshiped him. The bar shrinks more and more when you try to find any solid evidence for that. We're not talking about, inject ivermectin, inject bleach. Don't worry about what the American Medical Association says. We're talking about serious challenges to an existing paradigm. And that's very different from just this David and Goliath caricature that it's always been. We're always going to be pariahs. That may never change, but the evidence still remains, and it's unanswered by Christianity, and it's unanswered by secular historicists.
I do want to revisit real quick there, Alfred, this idea that you think that New Testament studies is primarily populated by people that don't think that Jesus resurrected from the dead. Like, is that what you truly think? Do you think that New Testament studies is full of scholars?
He seems to think they're all in agreement. And I think he thinks they're all in agreement more than they are in agreement.
Right. Well, no, but he said earlier that he doesn't believe that the majority of New Testament scholars think that as a historical fact, Jesus resurrected from the dead, which would seem to imply that a majority of New Testament scholars don't believe that, so that, somehow, I don't know, it seems like a persecution fetish thing again. But tell me, Alfred, what's your opinion? Do you think that New Testament scholarship is full of people that think that Jesus resurrecting from the dead as a historical fact is not true? Like, do you think that that's what New Testament studies is primarily full of?
Okay, I'll just note that you use strong rhetoric to marginalize a dissenting opinion. That is a hallmark of a conspiracy theory. So thank you for that.
When you say strong rhetoric, there's a difference between rhetoric and facts.
Fetishizing persecution. Fetishizing persecution. That's not strong rhetoric.
Are you seriously claiming persecution right now? Oh my God!
No, I don't know,
David. I'm done with the conversation.
No. I think he's saying that I think you're saying that we do that. Yeah. We're in a minority opinion. Full stop. There's no other judgment than that.
I'm sorry. My point was that he used strong rhetoric to marginalize dissenting opinion, and he used
what was the strong rhetoric?
Persecution.
I asked a fucking question, Alfred. What was the strong rhetoric?
Fetishizing persecution.
No, oh my God. What was the strong rhetoric I used?
I told you, fetishizing persecution.
Oh
you know
God.
what? Here's the thing. I think we're about as close to a consensus between our two sides here as we're going to get tonight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways, Alfred, I don't know, David, are you done with the conversation? I'm kind of done with the conversation.
No,
it seems
I'm not. But we're both sides are getting very easily triggered. And when you start saying things like, "Oh, we're crying persecuted," we're not crying persecuted. We are a minority, and we always will be.
Well, no. So
we have reasons for what we're saying.
David, I think he's saying that me claiming that he's persecuted, or him seeing persecution everywhere, that's apparently the harmful kind of rhetoric that conspiracy theorists lay against, I guess, other people that are outside of the belief.
You also rationalize why the consensus doesn't agree with you. That's another hallmark.
Well,
there's
a difference between explaining and rationalizing. If that wasn't a fact, I mean, you're welcome to believe whatever you want to believe. But if you have evidence for it, let's see it. We have evidence and we've put it out there. I'm not seeing any addressing of the evidence we take. And here's another thing. There's lots of so-called Jesus mythicists that we are not on board with at all. Jesus myth theory is not a single thing. There's what John referred to earlier about the people, Roman providence, that the Romans invented it, that Flavius Josephus invented it. Those are crackpot theories that do not hold up. And mythicists like us have debunked them just as much as we debunk historicist claims that don't hold up. That's a little different.
This is a way of boosting your credibility.
Oh, no, it's a big conspiracy against us. A big, mean consensus is against us. No, we've never said that. I'll give you an example of that. Bart Ehrman, when he was debating Robert Price, who actually is both of them are qualified scholars with reverend, degrees in the field. He said, "You mythicists are always, if you see something you don't like, you claim it's an interpolation in the scriptures." And Robert Price rightly pointed out, "No, excuse me, we didn't point out that those are interpolations. That's recognized as interpolations. We didn't have anything to do with it, but." It's funny, they all support mythicism. Those are all true things. Those are all facts. Okay. Anyway, if you want to call us conspiracy theory, that's fine. But just keep in mind that the official story of Christianity does not hold water the more you look into it. And I invite you to look into it. And you know what? We can play this game with any other religion out there you want, don't think we're just picking on Christianity. And again, if I thought there was even a chance that there was a real Jesus out there, I would feel honor bound to write about that, because I've been talking about Jesus being a myth for over a quarter century now. And so I've got a lot to say.
We're on an atheist channel. Is it just a coincidence that over 90% of the mythicists are militant anti-theists? Do you think that's a coincidence?
Well, I don't think that fucking matters.
Do you think? Yeah. Do you think? What do you think is weird about that? Do you think if we were on a Catholic channel and we're saying, "Yeah, the Virgin Mary never existed," do you think? You think that would fly for a minute? Of course. This is where we're all atheists. I don't know any mythicists. Well, no, actually, I was going to say I do know a couple mythicists that are Christians. Thomas Brody is a Catholic. Yeah, there are a few, and he thinks God exists, but he didn't think Jesus exists. That you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot right there. I
don't know what we've said tonight. I don't know what we've said tonight has indicated that we're militant anti-theists. I would classify myself.
You watched your program.
You okay? You watched the program.
I have Christians I love. I have Christians I love, but I am a militant anti-theist. I am a big old atheist. I make no bones about it. Doesn't mean I don't love people. Doesn't mean I love Christians. Doesn't mean I don't love people of many religions. But that name calling is meaningless. It's completely meaningless.
Sure. I would just
I
like
would say
to close
that's
with
even
this point.
strong rhetoric that is meaningless. It's just another way to easily dismiss it.
Okay. So Friedrich Nietzsche he's my second favorite writer probably. And he went scorched earth on, the idea of God. He's like 50 tears up, basically. And he knew Jesus existed. And
how did he know that? I would love to know how Nietzsche knew that. I would know what his reasons were for saying that.
He had no reasons at all.
I don't think he investigated the possibility of a historical Jesus at all, because the idea.
I'm sure it occurred.
Well,
I'm sure it
definitely occurred in the 2nd century and the 3rd century, when we have critics of Christianity saying, this sounds a lot like when we have Christian church fathers like Firmicus Maternus and Justin Martyr admitting as much, that these are just we're saying the same things about our Jesus as you say about other sons of gods. The fact that we have a son of God in Judaism appearing at the same time that all these other sons of gods came about, and we don't see it in early incarnations of Judaism. That's an interesting fact too. A coinky-dink, as you would say? Yeah. Well, it's quite a coincidence.
It was an incendiary thing to say at the time. When they said Jesus is the Son of God.
It wasn't.
No.
It wasn't.
It was incendiary, because when they said Jesus was Son of God, the subtext was Jesus, not Caesar, is the Son of God. You realize that, right?
I know that there were lots of sons of gods being promoted at that time.
Yes.
Both in and
Romulus was a son of God.
I was going to say, and you don't see that in the Old Testament. You don't see that in earlier forms of Judaism. You only see that when that idea started percolating through the Hellenistic world.
That's in Genesis 5 or 6, sons of God, I believe.
You know when Genesis was written? Do you?
I don't think anyone really knows. It was redacted in the 600s.
That is also untrue. And you really need to read my books. Honestly, I'm not bragging on myself, because it's not my ideas, but the scholarship is out there.
Alfred,
we know when Genesis was written now. Yeah. You keep saying things that are the old paradigm. Catch up to what scholars are saying now. Tell your guy who wrote
the documentary theory.
Catch up.
The GAPD. I'm just curious.
I missed all that. Say again.
Sorry, what do you think of the documentary hypothesis, the JPDE?
Read Russell Demerkin's Berosus in Genesis, Manetho in Exodus, and he will give a good breakdown on how, yes, these are all different sources, but that does not mean they were written in different times. He gives a very good argument that those are different sources that were incorporated into what we call the Pentateuch and the Septuagint.
Well, thanks, guys, for taking my call. I appreciate it.
Well, and honestly, for as heated and feisty as it got, we appreciate your call, too.
Thank you, David.
So I thank you, too. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Alfred. We'll see you later.
Does he call a lot? Has he called before?
I don't know if he's called before.
Okay.
He has regular calls.
Oh, he has?
Well, good. Okay. Good for him. That means he's listening to this. Maybe he'll learn something.
Hey, if you liked that clip, you'd love the whole thing. Hit like, subscribe, leave a comment, patreon.com/calltheline. That one sucked. Use it.